Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is such an amazing crowd. We're so glad that you're here. I'm Amy Buckner-Chaudhry. I'm the CEO and founder of AnswerLab, and I love seeing all of your smiling faces out here to learn about AI. For those of you who don't know, AnswerLab is a user experience research firm, and we work with companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon and FedEx and Amex to bring a human-centered design process to every product that they launch. So you're sitting in our San Francisco office. We have labs over here. We also have a New York office with the labs, and that New York office is moving to the Empire State Building soon. And I'm going to have to look very awkward while I talk into this. Just right here? Okay, thanks. And then we have UX researchers all over the US, so that's a little bit about us. You might notice that before you are all women, and that is no accident. So Sunday was Women's Equality Day. And although it was Women's Equality Day and over 100 years ago we all earned the right to vote, there's still a long way to go for women. So I have some fun fact questions to ask you. Do you know how many women are in tech jobs? The percentage of tech jobs that are held by women. Anyone know? Want to guess? 20, 35, 15? The answer is 20%. So only 20% of tech jobs are held by women. Now let's narrow that down a bit. How about AI researchers? What percent of AI researchers are women? 2, 12, 14. This one in the back read our article that was posted in Slack this week. So it's 12%. And we think these numbers are dismal. And because we think they're dismal, we are donating all of the ticket sales from this event and all of our events this quarter to AI for All, because we believe that AI needs to be inclusive. So we've asked Tiffany Schemata to come here. She's a director from AI for All. We've asked her to come here and talk a little bit about the organization before we kick off the panel. And you'll have to hold your arm.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Amy. And also shout out to Tanya. We're really excited to be recognized this evening. Again, my name is Tiffany Schemata, and I'm actually the Director of University Partnerships at AI for All, which is a new organization, nonprofit, that's based in Oakland. Our mission is to diversify the field of artificial intelligence. And we do that by partnering with different universities across the country and Canada, and we bring students to have summer programs there. And then we also partner with those students after the programming to help them with internships, jobs, and also supporting them through college. So I'll just give you a little bit of information about it. Currently, we're partnered with Stanford, Berkeley, Simon Fraser, which is a university in Canada. We have a partnership with Boston University, Princeton, and Carnegie Mellon. So that's a nice group of universities currently, and next year we'll be expanding. And we hope to expand throughout the years to come. This past year, we actually just graduated 150 students from those 6 universities, so that's really exciting. And we now have over 250 students who are alumni of this program, 25 of whom are first years in college. And these are all women. These students are either women of color, or they come from low-income backgrounds, or they're coming from geographically diverse places. So we have students in our program from as far as Saudi Arabia. We had a student at Stanford, our program there, from Saudi Arabia, China, Puerto Rico. Definitely I mentioned Canada. So definitely a diverse group of students. I'd love to share with you 2 highlights that I think you'd be really interested in. We have 2 students right now. One student was working at the MIT Media Lab, and she's interested in criminal justice reform. And some of you may know this, but there's some software that's being used right now to predict the sentencing for a few criminals. And unfortunately, machines are biased. They actually reinforce our own human biases and racism and prejudices. And so, as you can predict, the software is disproportionately giving longer sentences to Black men for similar crimes as white men, white women, etc. So we have a student right now who's working on researching this, looking at the algorithms, really dissecting how do we actually put in biases within these algorithms, and how do we mitigate that risk? And I think this panel, you'll all hear about that a little bit more, but for me, it really starts at the bottom, at the foundation, ensuring that the people who are involved in the development and the creation are also diverse, and they represent the population that will be using this work. So I'm really excited to be here and to be listening. I'll be around after, so definitely if you want to learn more about AI for All, please come up and ask me a question. You can follow us on Twitter, you can go to our website, aiforall.org, but I'm really happy to be here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. We're just so thrilled that there are people like you in the world working on this problem. So tonight, we're going to have a very incredible panel here to talk with you. And at times, you might want to tweet about what you're listening to. And so if you need to tweet, there's our Wi-Fi and our guest password so that you can get on to do that. Okay, so I'd like to start with our panel here, starting from the left to the right to do the introductions. Noelle LaCharity here on the left. Noelle leads developer experience for Microsoft Cognitive Services. And there she runs programs to build intelligent algorithms to see, hear, speak, understand, and interpret user needs through natural methods of communication. She's a technology evangelist, and she's passionate about voice technology, AI bots, and mindful leadership. And I have a fun fact. We have a whole kind of thing in our culture at AnswerLab that when you introduce yourself to someone, you have to include a fun fact. So the fun fact for Noelle is that she was crowned a perfect princess by Disney for running 5 half marathons, princess half marathons.
Fun, right? Oh wait, it gets better.
All right, so next up we have Ava Steele-Saccio. Ava is a conversation designer at Google, and she's a writer and conversational UI designer who's created interactive content for Facebook Messenger chatbots, for smart speaker voice experiences, for interactive toys, apps, games, and more. And the fun fact about Ava is that she wrote a book about thumb wrestling. Can you also thumb wrestle?
Yeah.
Great. So there's
Take
your
you on all
challenge
after.
for later. All right, next up we have Isel Viscara. Isel is a conversation engineer at Autodesk, where she works on optimizing dialogue for the Autodesk virtual assistant. So Isel recently led a project to add voice and motion to the Autodesk virtual assistant through a video chat feature. And her fun fact is that in college, she decided to learn Arabic because everyone assumed incorrectly that she was Arab. And our illustrious UX researcher from AnswerLab, Lynn Nee. Lynn is working here in our New York office, but visiting here to San Francisco this week because she is part of our prestigious research fellowship at AnswerLab. In the research fellowship, she's focusing on conducting interdisciplinary research right now on digital assistants and voice-activated technology for older adults. She also works on lots of projects, custom research solutions for Amex, Facebook, and Google. And fun fact about Lynn is that she completed her graduate thesis on what tango can teach human-computer interaction. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn to get into the juicy content for tonight. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you so much, Amy, for the introduction. So I wrote my first little dumb neural network model in college in a cognitive science class, and I forgot about it. Now AI is very much part of our lives, from voice assistants, chatbots, self-driving cars, predictive ads, recommendations, just to name a few that are living among us. So I think regardless of the AI application, we're going to hear a lot tonight. A common thread is that they're replacing or simplifying the tasks that we're doing, and that makes UX piece essential because we want to understand what human task AI is replacing first. My first question for the panel then is to start us with an example that you could point to for doing that UX piece with AI right. And it could be your work or others. It could be something that's in the works.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start off. So I work on the Autodesk Virtual Agent, and which is essentially a customer support bot to help our customers get to the right answer quickly whenever they're having any issues. And if anyone has ever worked in customer support, answering phone calls or responding to chats, you know that you don't deal with happy customers. So I feel that an experience where we really wanted to emphasize in getting the user experience right has been to fail gracefully. One thing is that humans are less forgiving with chatbots than they are with humans. So if the bot responds with, "I'm sorry, I don't understand," then we need to offer other outlets, whether that is offering other self-service tools, offering a nice handoff between the bot to a human agent, or simply letting them know that that's not a Autodesk related domain. So we really have done many iterations on that topic, and I can't say, I don't know when we will get it right, but definitely doing analysis and research on after we launch has been very beneficial on our end.
So one thing that I think Google Assistant, which is what I work on, does very well is morning. So for those of you who don't know Google Assistant, it lives on your Android phone. If you have a Google Home, it's on your Google Home, smart display speaker, etc. So when I wake up in the morning, I want to know like a few things to start out my day. I want to know what the weather is outside so I know how to dress. I want to know what my commute to work is like so I know when to leave the house. And then I also want to know what's on my calendar for the day. So if you ask your Google Assistant, you know, what's my day like, the assistant will deliver all of that information in one exchange. Or similarly, if you look at your smart display, you'll see all of that information there. So that's way better than having to open 3 different apps on your phone and go through each one of those in order to get the information that you want and need.
So thank goodness I have such awesome people on this panel, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm super nervous all of a sudden. But now I'm ready. Okay, so, but to give you a couple examples, and I totally messed up my mic, so if it's a mess, tell me. I'd be happy to like hold my hand up if necessary. But I actually was on one of the early developers on Alexa. I spent 4 years at Amazon, and one of the first skills that I built 3 years ago was mindfulness. And that back then you weren't allowed, or now you're not allowed to build skills that have just one word as the invocation name. But I built this mindfulness skill. And after that I built another 7 skills, and all of them ended up being in the top 10 skills used on the platform up until just recently, which I've never worked on them again since I built them, which is a shame. But the thing I found, people kept asking me, how are you building these like one-shot wonders that become super usable and like people love them? And I'll just tell you kind of the secret that I used, and I still use this to build skills today. And it's, you know, people, at least the people that I interact with, they want skills they use. They want things on a platform that they use every day. It's the reason why everyone uses music and timers, right? Or things that are just contextually things you'll want to use every single day. So I thought about myself, of course, what I wanted the world to use every day, which was a mindfulness app. But then I also went like out to Google Trends and I said, what's trending on daily, right? What are people Googling that has the word daily attached to it? And guess what came up? Mindfulness came up, meditation came up, kindness came up. Granted, again, a lot of other stuff came up, but those are the things that I saw. And I used to actually go to the airport wearing a shirt that says, I heart AI, and people would literally stop me and be like, you know that's the end of us, right? And I'd be like, I do, but I wrote a mindfulness app, so regardless, they will be peaceful and zen about it. But I do find that like thinking in those terms, when you're building for voice, right, building for the ear, also thinking in these terms of like, how are people going to use this? In my case, building something that people would use every day, naming it something that indicated daily usage really improved. And granted, things have changed obviously in the last 4 years. We've evolved a little bit. But I still find that those skills that are geared towards that daily usage are my highest performing skills on the platform.
Fantastic. So we would love to dive a little deeper into the examples and your current work in terms of how the technology of AI, you're using that in your examples, your work. I know, Noelle, you're overseeing a bunch of AI, but yeah.
Yeah. So with the chatbot, you really want to get the recognition part correctly. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are less trusting of interacting with a computer interface than with the human. So whenever they engage in a conversation with the chatbot, their threshold for patience is much lower than it is with a human. So with that, we focus a lot on the recognition aspect of it. So if a user comes in and says, I need a license, do we give them a driver's license information? Do we give them license for Autodesk software and so on? So we really want to make sure that we get that both context and recognition part of it correctly. And that happens through a lot of training data. And before I took on this endeavor, I didn't realize how manual AI actually was. And I spent so much of my time labeling data and trying to figure out ways of automating labeling data. And it's just so repetitive. And it's honestly very draining when you think about it. It's like, I didn't go to college to label data, but then you really realize the importance of it and what it means to have properly labeled data. And as Tiffany mentioned earlier, like machines can be very biased. So you want to make sure that you're accounting for like a complete scenario in that case to feed into your algorithm, and then your algorithm returns something that you actually want it to return. For example, the proper context behind what your customer is actually asking.
So as a conversation designer, for those of you who don't know what that means, because many people don't, essentially I'm thinking about what the user is saying to the assistant and then how the assistant is going to respond to the user in that particular example. So like Giselle said, like a lot of what we use AI for is actual speech recognition, hearing what the user says, and then turning it into intent. So let's say the user says, like, take me home. We know that they actually mean that they want directions home. So that's the intent there. And then serving up whatever content is pertinent to that particular request. Another way that I use AI is in personalization. So making sure that answers are actually personalized to the user. And then one thing I'd like to point out is that I actually actively avoid using AI in my design. And part of the reason that I do that is that conversations between the assistant and a person should be conversations. And so I really am intentional about crafting language that people would actually say in real life to sort of define those actions between the assistant and the user.
So I do love voice. I'm a voice person, been building for it for a long time, but you guys totally nailed that. So I'm going to talk about a different type of AI. So I lead development experience or developer experience for cognitive services. And what that means, we call it applied AI. And basically it means we want to, just like you said, avoid engineers, data scientists, people with more things to do than look at data and analyze images, for example. We want to take that work away. And so what we've done is commoditized 30 models, 30 AI models, like face recognition, speech, speech to text, text to speech, computer vision, the ability to analyze an image. You can imagine if you're in a retail you're a retailer, and you want, instead of a user when they come to your site and chatting with a bot, instead of them having to type in I want a dress watch, right? Instead, maybe it would be really cool if they could just pass in a picture of what they want, or better yet, take a selfie, right, with the watch and say, I want one just like this because this one's busted, or whatever it is. But it's a picture, or even a video, and now you're able to, you don't need to be a data scientist, you just need to be a developer. You could use a web-based API to process that image, do object detection, identify the watch in the image, and go, oh, I can now do a search, which, by the way, is AI. Early on, I used to think search AI, that's cheap AI, easy AI. Actually, not so much. We're just so used to it now, we don't realize. But there's actually algorithms behind that But one of the things I think it's super important to understand, kind of like the AI for all, like these algorithms, you don't have to build yourself anymore. Like anyone who has an aptitude, and we'll talk about this at the end about like your next steps, but if you have an aptitude or a passion for technology, you can learn a programming language and now infuse AI in it. Like right now, computer vision, I mean, you name it. You heard her, that beautiful introduction, which I would love a copy of, by the way, so I can use it. But like vision, speech, knowledge, text, all of these are models that you should not spend your time investing development hours in anymore. We should use it to take the work away from designers and go, no, 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 let a model do that work. And then you get to start where those models leave off. And that's really Microsoft's goal, which is this whole concept of improving human ingenuity, taking our just the fact that we want to do bigger, better things just as a human race and not waste our energy processing images, which is something a computer is actually pretty good at.
Great. I think all three of you are already sort of demystifying AI little by little for us. So I'm going to go deeper on that and start with you, Noelle, and go this way. You've been a notable evangelist of AI and a lover of codes herself, for those that are that don't know. What have you found most interesting in the process of communicating this technology to general public as you go out there? I Heart AI. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so similarly, right? So obviously, there's a little tiny bit of fear. Shocking. But it's true. And the other thing you actually alluded to, which is a lot of people think artificial intelligence is somehow not artificial. Like artificial intelligence, my first skill was literally a list of my second skill after mindfulness was daily affirmation. Super popular on Alexa. It was the first affirmation skill we had, and they like advertised it all the time. And I literally had a list of 300. It started off at 25 and then grew to 360 because I wanted someone to be able to roll through the whole thing for a year before getting another one again. But it was literally me like typing it in. Now my dad and my mom were like, oh, it's amazing. It knew exactly what I needed to hear that day. Affirmations are awesome that way. But it was literally like, I was shocked when I built it that I was like, wait, like, I have to write all this? Like, isn't there something that's going to generate or automate? No, it was me handwriting it in. More importantly, not just the affirmations, but also every single utterance. In other words, everything someone would say to invoke that skill, I also had to predefine. So it wasn't magic. There was no, like, it was part of that demystifying. I built these skills thinking, I have zero acoustic experience. I have no background. I have no PhD. I love PhDs. I just don't have one. Don't want to go back to school. But I'm a developer, and I love developing. And as a result, I now realize, oh my gosh, I love AI too. I just don't want to write the algorithm. I like using them, and I like the fact that about 70% of what enterprises need to do today could do it much better with AI. And knowing these models and infusing them using REST, oh my gosh, like the world is our oyster. So just that is all.
Interesting. Any challenges in that process of communicating?
I would say the biggest challenge is most organizations are not. So right now I sell AI. Oh, gosh, it's hard for me to even say that. But it's like an enterprise solution. I go and talk to CEOs and CTOs and I say like, Microsoft AI, it's not a thing. You can't download it. It's an idea. But here are all these models you can buy. And my biggest challenge with that is that AI is research and will always be research. And everything you do in AI will always be an experiment, and they will mostly fail. And so moving into a world like I'm in the new Microsoft, thank goodness. And the new Microsoft is all about like fail fast, iterate. Like I don't know Microsoft any other way. Some of you might know a different Microsoft, but that's the only one I know. But many organizations are very averse to this concept of like, oh, you're going to spend 6 months on that model and it actually is never going to give you a prediction worth building anything that'll make us money. No, we're not doing that. So changing the mindset of first the executive level and then more importantly, the development and engineers to say it's okay, like it's actually built to fail, like you're building experiments constantly. It's super fun. We borrowed it from academia. It's awesome way to develop code in enterprises. but it's a really difficult shift for organizations to make. So I always say, like, I always leave the room going, it's an experiment to try and get everybody on the right page, but it's a tough paradigm shift.
Great.
Yep.
So Isal, Noel sees a lot of AI. Your ongoing AI project with the Autodesk customer support automated agent Ava actually has a well-defined job. Correct me if I'm wrong. So tell us about from ideation of Ava to where it is now. What have been some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so a lot of the challenges that, or user experience challenges that we've faced have been very heavily focused on both UX research that we've done prior to it. So as it was mentioned earlier, is that we developed this new video avatar, which we got a lot of hesitation for internally. And this video avatar is supposed to respond. It has a human face. It responds to your emotions. It can read positive, negative, neutral, and confused faces. And we collect that data. But it also, you can speak to it, and it does the speech to text and so on. So it got a lot of hesitation when we first were exploring that user experience, simply because we decided to perform some user experience with our users, and a lot of our users are architects, and they might not necessarily be too, they might be a little bit more hesitant to try like a video technology with a robot that looks like a human. But we definitely, we believe that you can build trust through transparency. So the way that we kind of overcame one of those challenges was simply adding like purple eyes to the robot, although it looks very, very human-like, and explicitly saying like, hey, this is an animated experience, this is a robot, I just want to let you know. We are also very transparent with like simply the way, what we use the data for, and we have very strict rules behind the type of like emotional data that we are collecting and what we want to gain from it. So that's definitely one of the UX challenges, but I'd say that we faced. But I'd say that the other UX challenge that I think has been the most critical on my end has been really decompressing the complicated back-end systems that we have and making them customer facing. So a customer doesn't need to know that their license type when it comes to their software. A customer doesn't need to know the details of their contract, right? But when when you call into a customer support agent, you can have a back and forth conversation very quickly and say like, oh, you can check it here and check it out here. But when you are developing like essentially a decision tree with the type of questions that you're anticipating with conversation design, which Eva might be able to talk a little bit more about, you have to kind of predict what the customer might ask at certain points and have to be prepared. You can't just ask an open-ended question and not be prepared to receive the answer that you're expecting. So you can't have that back and forth conversation as to like, oh, well, I don't know where I can find my serial number. Like, tell me where it's at, in the middle of a conversation about activating a product, right? So we were practically almost asking our customers for like their mother's maiden name, and it's so much information for the bot to kind of digest. So finding a way to really simplify that complex back-end process and making it customer facing has been by far one of the like largest user experience challenges that we faced. But fortunately for us is that simplification is like a really big emphasis on our team, and we are a very interdisciplinary team to the point where we have creative writers on the team, we have data scientists, software developers, and we can kind of all come together and bring our ideas and really chunk it down to the core of the problem to develop a better user experience, and that the way that our customers will really understand, but while trying to minimize the amount of questions that we're asking.
Interesting. And going back to the first UX challenge, tell us a little bit more, what were some of the initial reactions from the users that you talked to, given that this AI is taking not just the digital data that we're familiar with, but also biological data, like you said, my video feed essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so some may say that we might have possibly ignored what UX research was telling us. But the truth of it is that the UX research was really telling us that our customers were hesitant to try this new technology. We showed them static images of what the bot would look like, so it wasn't even a virtual image that they were seeing, and they were already hesitant. So there was a lot of pushback. At my company, you have people that have been there for 20 years, and then you have people that just started. So there was this constant like, oh, we should do research, we should really guardrail this, and we should kind of make sure that this isn't just open to everyone. And then we had the other end of the spectrum, let's just launch it and see how it goes. Like open it to the public so everyone, and we'll learn from our mistakes. So fail quickly. And we were able to come to a compromise and both agree that, you know what, we'll guardrail it behind sign-in. So everyone needs to have like an Autodesk account. It won't be open to the public, but we will also like present this information as a beta. And what this bot was is a interactive experience. So with all of our animated experiences, we also offer a standard experience. And customers have the option to opt in into video and microphone, and they can completely interact full text experience with our video avatar, or choose to not engage with it at all and simply proceed with their text only experience without having the avatar in their face, kind of like moving around and staring. So that's just been a way that we've dealt with that.
Great. So I think this idea, all three of you alluded, and Isel just mentioned, it's AI work. It's by definition interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and it's interesting that we often cannot help to personify AI as if it's like a personified thing, but it's easy to forget it's a group of diverse, people coming together to do this work. Eva, before you were you're now a conversation designer at Google and then formerly Poststring, but before you have a long career as a writer. Tell us a little bit about how are you bringing that human touch to a very engineering-focused environment, which is most of tech.
Yeah, so I think like at the heart of what I'm trying to do is to make conversation actually conversational. So that means like using the language that everyday people use, and also trying to avoid technical or jargony speak. So like an example of that is if your assistant, for example, wants to know where you're headed, where you're going on a trip, like one way that you might approach that is be like, so to which destination do you want to go? Which sounds like really technical, mechanical. You don't want to hear that. A better way of doing that would be to just say, where do you want to go? So I think like in sort of more engineering focused environments that we tend a little bit more towards the super technical sounding experiences. And part of my job, which is helpful as a writer, and especially writing for kids, is to bring it into just like that real speak environment. Another thing that I do a lot of in conversation design is thinking about how the way that humans process information should actually inform the way that I'm writing prompts. So sometimes, like if you read a sentence, the important information usually comes at the beginning of that sentence because that's what you read first. That's where your eye goes. In voice design, the most important information actually needs to go at the end of the sentence because cognitively that's what we're retaining. So it's pretty interesting when you think about it from the perspective of like how you're writing prompts. So let's say I wanted to write a prompt about someone asking when a flight is leaving. So to write that good prompt, I'd need to say where it's leaving from, where it's going, and then also give the time that it's departing. So a good prompt in that instance would be like, your flight from San Francisco to Chicago departs at 9:45 p.m. tonight. Notice how 9:45 p.m. is at the very end of the sentence. That's called end focus principle. It's one of many principles that we use in conversation design that actually is similar to stuff that we use in writing, but just shifted a little bit differently.
Interesting. I think the end focus principle explains a lot of my arguments that I encounter in relationships. The last thing that, so I'm learning, definitely taking that home.
Note taken.
Explaining a lot. So I think this idea has come up already, but I'm going to sort of address it explicitly. This idea of human context being this ever-present biggest challenge to AI. However, dealing with it and solving it is important to deliver a good experience. So give us some examples. This is the question posed to the entire panel, where let's start with where the human context challenge the machine, so the limitations.
I was like, what was I going to say? Oh, right. I remember now. Okay. So I have dealt with this in multiple different ways, but one very real way was back to this mindfulness, and some of my skills start this way. But they have a certain way of starting, a certain dialogue that tells the user what to do. So you can imagine with mindfulness or meditation, it tells you to do something. Well, recently, when I built that skill, there was one device. It was called the Echo, and it had no screen, and there was no other place for it to go. Now I've not changed that skill. And now we've got multiple screens. You could see like for the affirmations, wouldn't it be nice if like it came up in this pretty like Instagrammy typographical font? No, it's just text. But anyway, so contextually, I never really thought outside of just this, I built for voice first, this cylinder that people would never see anything on. Well, mindfulness actually it was really popular. It got promoted in a bunch of emails. I surpassed like 1 million users in year 3. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then Alexa for the car was born. And Alexa for the car was like, we love your skill. We want to promote it. And they're like, oh, yeah, but it's broken. And I'm like, what do you mean it's broken? And they're like, well, because the first thing you say in the skill is to close your eyes. And they're in a car, so that's not going to work out for us. And I haven't actually updated my skill. I should, though. Many mindfulness things you can do in the vehicle, but I did not. But it was one of those things that you don't think about, and that now in the age of voice and in the age of what we call multimodal, development, you're building for voice, but you also have to build for all of these different things, like that I just never would have thought of. Building for screens, building for big, huge screens through Fire TV, or tiny screens on like the little spot. All these things that I never thought of. So it's a slightly different context, but knowing the context in which your developers or which your users are going to be building in and experiencing your skill in is actually pretty critical. So
I'd love to add on to that. So I think designing for multimodal is super important. Another area where I think we have room for improvement is situational context by location. So you might feel super comfortable at home talking aloud to a speaker. Like that feels fine because no one's listening. But the minute you go into a public place, it's going to be much more uncomfortable for you to pick up your phone and have a voice interaction. So it's important to like design for the mode of communication, but then I think it's also important to think about the type of communication that you're having based on your location.
Yeah, to build off of Ava's example about situational context setting, I'll tell you guys a very terrible example on our end is, so we deal with customer support, and we have very angry customers coming to ask us a bunch of questions. And when they don't get the right answer, they might use like profanity, or they might say, "Are you effing kidding me? Is this a joke or something?" And we decided to build for both like conversational aspects, but also answering people's questions, right? And what I mean by conversational aspects, I mean more so acknowledging when people are saying thank you, goodbye, are asking for a random Monty Python joke, are asking for a joke specifically, because a lot of users were coming into our bot and testing it out. They wanted to kind of anticipate the intelligence and then decided. And then after testing it out, if Ava returned a joke, then they would continue and actually ask a customer support related question. In one scenario, the scenario where the customer came out and said, "Are you effing kidding me? Like, is this a joke?" Ava responded with, "What do you call a fake noodle?" Pasta. So we built for jokes, and we quickly learned that we need to build for context as well. We don't want to respond with jokes to customers that are extremely angry because one, it's not appropriate, and two, like we're losing our trust with the customer. So definitely there's a huge responsibility on our end to really balance that out, and when it's appropriate to use conversation and when more conversational, like human to human interactions, but when it's also appropriate to stick to a little bit more technical details and limit the type of context that you're interacting with.
So to follow up on all that you said, how are we then, until it gets better, dealing with these limitations of AI, and that's related to building trust with the users that are interacting with these AI systems?
I definitely feel that to continue to build trust, you really have to acknowledge when you're wrong. And that's very courageous, both like from a human perspective, but also from like when you're building that into a robot, and acknowledging part of that you're failing and what you can do to move forward with that. So I mentioned earlier that failing gracefully is something that we really want to get the user experience right. So when this customer was really upset and then we responded with a pasta joke, we very quickly learned that we needed to iterate and limit that constraint. And with that, we came about to essentially learning how to recognize when a customer is upset. So we need to acknowledge now when people use the word like the F word, we want to acknowledge that the customer is most likely upset. So we do not want to respond with a joke.
Interesting.
I think we have a lot of information and we just need to do a better job of actually using it. So there are cues that our users might give us about where they are, with the example I gave of, wanting to use voice in one situation and not knowing or not in another. So for example, if you're interacting with your Google Home, you know that you're in a comfortable environment in which they probably feel perfectly happy using your voice. Say you're adding to a shopping list to go to the grocery store, then if you're accessing that shopping list when you're at the grocery store, which we also probably know about you if you've turned on location services, then we can switch that interaction to be more text-based. So I think it's a matter of using the information that we do have to build a better experience for the user.
Yeah, I would probably kind of piggyback on that by saying that in addition to, kind of using just good design principles and thinking beyond, like in my case, I was very much building for myself. Like, hey, I'd use this skill and I'd use it for this purpose. But using good just UX design principles, not specifically AI, just good user design. But on top of that, being able to also know our technology is evolving extremely fast. And when I say that, granted, I own all the SDKs for all of the pre-built models at Microsoft AI, right? So for that, which is, like I said, there's like 30 of them. All of them are owned by little teams. They're now big teams, but they started off as little research teams that eventually grew to product teams. 30 of them. They're all revving and adding features to their APIs to make your ability to use these and access this information through a call. They're adding this every day. So what they've found you failed to do yesterday, they might actually add today. And you would have maybe already wrote it off, right, in your mind, going, oh, well, that API doesn't have what I need. So the one thing I would probably encourage you to do as users of AI technology is constantly be aware of this stuff is evolving more rapidly than I've seen anything ever. The combination of the agile movement combined with AI model development and commoditization of models is now creating an environment where you have to do your homework now, like on a daily basis. If you're using computer vision, you just gotta, I live in GitHub. I'm just constantly watching the pull requests that get taken in and which ones become product features. I literally, because I own some of those repos, I'm pulling in things and putting them into sprints. And the developers are like, wait, does that mean it's in the product now? I'm like, yes, it does. Like, it's just shocking because they can't imagine how quickly these things are moving. But around this kind of solution around context, for example, Alexa added to their SDK the ability to ask or query the environment, find out what's the device ID, what kind of device am I on, right? Does it have a screen? And if it has a screen, do something different, right? So, but if I'm a developer, which unfortunately I am, who built a skill and walked away and kind of went, well, that's doing pretty good. I don't have to do anything else. I never knew until I just recently co-authored the exam for skill builders for Alexa. And in doing that, I learned all this stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go rebuild my skills, because now there's ability to do things that we couldn't do 2 years ago. But the moral of the story is that there are engineers just like us adding features every day to make it easier for developers to do things that were much harder even just a year ago.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm gonna change gears here to turn to a whole different aspect of AI. I think some audience are eager to hear the next few questions as well. So I think Tiffany touched upon this already. AI is not inherently good, to tie back to her opening. We definitely hear a lot of ethical blunders of AI right now on a day-to-day basis in the news. So I think with every technology, there is a social and human context, but with AI, it's sort of, never been before, the conversation is happening so much earlier. My question is, what's your philosophy, first of all, on thinking around the social and ethical implications of AI? And how does that thinking really fit into your day-to-day work? If there's a story you can share with us or something like that.
Sure, I'll start. So I'm super passionate about this because it's the reason I actually joined Microsoft. Microsoft is one of the thought leaders around ethics and AI, and they have a whole collection of principles. It's called the Principles of AI, and we don't build AI unless it falls into these principles. We have internal review boards. First time I've ever been in an organization where models don't go out the door until an ethics review is done. That's, again, maybe you don't know, but that doesn't happen. I've been in many companies where we built models, and I never had an ethics review go, yeah, no, you're not going to go live. Sorry. What? We had this really great special needs application that we had built, and I built it based on the needs of my son who has Down syndrome, and I was like, this is fantastic. It's going to solve, so many moms are going to be like, this is the best thing I've ever used. And we took it as part of the launch process through ethics review, and ethics kiboshed it. No, you're not even go back and work on it. Just you're done. Thank you for, right? It's an experiment. Don't be upset. Just try again. And I was upset, but I went back and really investigated our ethics at Microsoft, and I aligned very much with it, which was in that application, though super applicable to myself and even to my son, it mischaracterized an entire population of people, right? If I launch that as the thing you do with Down syndrome kids, whoa, it's not the right thing to do. And it wasn't even under Microsoft, of course, as a company wouldn't back it, but even it made me think, oh my goodness, if I have an AI company, I want to have people that are completely subjective looking at my work going, is this the right thing to do? And then not doing it no matter how much money we would make. Right? That was the big, again, the Microsoft I know and love. I was like, oh my goodness, we are making choices today where we will not go into business, we will not go into partnerships with things that are not the right thing to do, and that right is defined by these principles. I don't have time to share all of them, but one of them that's super close to my heart is that we build for human ingenuity. So one of my main messages when I go into companies is the first thing you can do is go into HR or customer support or legal, finance. These people have inboxes full of questions they don't want to answer. So could I go in and build a bot using natural language, right? Using AI that could answer, they already have the stash of email answers that they click and drag over or copy and paste in. You know what we found is that, it didn't change the ROI or bottom line financially of companies, but what it did is it super infused the productivity of those staffs that no longer had to answer those questions. And they actually saw with that productivity increase, customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction increase, which, by the way, turns into money for the company. So these are the types of things, that's where we want to invest. There's awesome, super cool things that we can build, but ethics say do the things that help create better humans, give humans the ability to do the things that they're passionate about, as opposed to building AI that gives you the answer. We don't want the answer, right? We want you to weed out the good stuff and let me, with my experience, with my human discernment, be able to make the right choice. And that's the kind of company, in my case, that I was looking for and surprised actually to find at Microsoft. But you should look it up, Microsoft AI Principles. It's really cool stuff.
So in my conversation design work, I really try to focus on like trust and transparency. I didn't design this, but I think a great example is that if you tell the Google Assistant to text your spouse, then the Google Assistant will acknowledge they actually don't know who your spouse is and ask for his or her name. And then if you come back and say, what's my husband's name? The Google Assistant will say, you told me that his name is Daria, my husband's Daria. And I think that's a really nice example of like showing to the user, because you probably forgot that you taught the assistant, what your spouse's name is, like showing that the assistant is aware that it got that information from you and that was a personal decision that you made to share with the assistant. So I think that's like a great lesson that I try to apply to all of my designs, is like really being clear about moments in which you're soliciting information and then also moments in which you're returning information.
That's awesome, by the way. That's awesome.
To Ava's point, very similarly, we are really big on transparency builds trust. And when you put a human face to an avatar for a chatbot that represents what today, like AI in general for people, it freaks people out. And we've had several iterations of our avatar. So we used to have a cartoon avatar and that had a human face, but it was very obvious that it was a cartoon and it looked super Star Trek-y. And then we moved on and we had a human face, like we modeled it after a living human being, and we like modified a little bit of stuff. Maybe we added some like a little bit more made it look a little bit more Hollywood, but so we were still at the point as to like, people don't like to be fooled. We need to provide that transparency. Like, what is this avatar doing? We were moving into voice and video, and we needed to see like how people were going to perceive that. So one of our big sticklers was purple eyes. We put purple eyes on our avatar to make it very clear that this wasn't a human entity, although it looks like a human entity and it tries to have a conversation. Very much like a human would, but we really wanted to emphasize that this is a robot, and two, it is not a human. So it's okay if you don't have that like complete like trust and intelligence, because Ava is a robot. So we definitely emphasized on the transparency portion of it.
Great. So what can we do to prevent when unfortunately bad instances do happen? So AI, replicate bias that are, replicated different values of the people making them. That's just like all things. So any practical advice around preventing or how to deal with bad instances?
Yeah, we have a horrible example that recently happened to us around facial recognition. If you look online, even today, facial recognition models are just a mess. It's something as simple as just going to like Google and asking for just type in CEO, right? And you'd be shocked to find that like you don't see a woman or a person of color for a very long time. And it's just, unfortunately, it's based on the world's data, and we as a world are biased, and that just showed up. But the worst thing about that was facial recognition. If you were white and male, the facial recognition model was almost never wrong, less than 1% from a precision perspective, which is awesome. Like the model is you're like, this is as good as you can ask for when it comes to model data or model performance. But as soon as it was anything other than that, darker colored men, white women, darker colored women, it exponentially got worse in detecting, being able to accurately predict or identify those people. And of course, that was based on the fact that we went around the world and took a bunch of pictures, right? That's all AI is a bunch of data. Facial recognition is a bunch of facial data. And if you know a little bit about facial recognition, if you have a new iPhone, it's not just like, you can't just go up to someone and be like, say cheese, right? And there we have model data. You have to take like front, side, up, down, and around. Like, it's a lot of work. And so two women did a study on 5 facial recognition models of the biggest companies and found that Microsoft was in one of the 5. These were the worst performing models with the worst data. And so to answer your question, one of the things that you can do to fix models that are bad, well, the only thing you can do is to get better data and add that data as quickly as possible. Now, the disadvantage to this timing is GDPR made getting data super hard and if they're smart, really expensive, right? You're like, oh, you want my face? That's $20. So like really hard, really expensive, but it didn't matter. Again, thankfully for a company like Microsoft, who's like, our job is to build good models that are ethically accurate. We literally sent forces into, we had a list of 17 different countries that were not accurately represented in the model. And we literally within 3 weeks of that report coming out, went and tried to fix it. We didn't even, with that dedicated effort, we still weren't able to get to a point where we were happy with it. It's an ongoing project today. 2 of the 5 companies came back and said, we've done something. Look, we're improving. The others didn't. I won't name them, but Microsoft, like, we felt like, and I'm part of the face team that went, like, we felt like we had to do that. And that's really what it comes down to, is that individuals in these companies or in the startups that maybe you guys might start, we have to be the ones that go, it's not okay for these models to be biased, and it's our responsibility to invest in getting the right data that removes these biases.
So I think that an important sort of design principle is asking for permission whenever you're doing something. So if and I think to step back a second, like, people have varying degrees of comfort levels with what they feel like their assistant should be doing for them, or they want their assistant to be doing for them. So it's important to like acknowledge that and build that into your design. So if I were to design like and add a calendar invite flow, for example, if the user says like add a doctor's appointment and this is the first time flow, the first thing I would do is ask permission to actually access their calendar. And then on top of that, to like show the value of what it is that you're doing. So by asking at that contextual moment in the flow, I'm sort of inherently hinting to the user, like, if you share your calendar info with me, I can set appointments up for you from now on, and give you the ease of taking that off of your plate. So yeah, just doing 2 things, like 1, asking for permission, and then 2, showing the value of whatever you're asking permission for.
I definitely agree to all the points that have been touched upon. I also wanted to touch on the fact that when people hear about artificial intelligence, they instantly think like robots are going to take over the world, we're going to lose our jobs, you're building a customer support agent, you're going to take all these people's jobs away. And it becomes a negative experience for a lot of people, or what they think of a negative experience. A way that we've dealt with that has actually been to, like, in reality, AI is meant to complement like human ingenuity. So we really want to contribute that and to contribute to that and really go with it. So for a lot of our agents, I think there was a study done by Gartner where Gartner stated that by 2020, 1.3 million jobs would be eliminated by AI, or 1.8 would be eliminated by AI, but at the same time, 2.3 million jobs would be created. And that was a really big, like, kind of learning point for us to emphasize that we're not building this customer support bot to compete with our agents. We're actually trying to help them become more focused on the more complex topics. And through a lot of the behavior and analysis that we've done since we've launched our robot, we've found that customer support agents are actually using a lot of the tools or the knowledge that the bot has to really create those automated responses and convert it into a more positive experience. But that definitely came with a lot of collaboration and discussions about ethics in AI, and like one-on-ones with some of the customer support agents. So definitely encouraging that conversation and what it means to when you're thinking about bringing AI to a role where people do fear losing their jobs. was definitely engaging on their end. And now we work together. Now we work together to come to the solutions. And we are allowing them to have more entertaining cases than the automated responses that they spent working on so much.
Great. So my last question for the panel before we open the floor for questions. With every technology comes with the need to update our skill sets. So I think in tech, we're constantly playing catching up, like the Buddhist adage goes, we're changing with change. So any practical advice for us and members in the audience that are looking, starting up and looking to develop their skills in AI?
Yeah, I think like it's just important to know if you're interested in conversation design that there's no clear path to it. So my background is in writing. A number of my colleagues come from linguistic backgrounds. Other are trained actors, musicians, etc. And really at heart, what you need is an understanding of how humans communicate, and then also the ability to think in terms of logic. So you do, when you're creating, conversation trees, you're doing a lot of sort of if-then thinking. So I think that's one piece of it. The second piece is like familiarizing yourself with conversational design principles. And I'm going to do it like shameless Google self-promotion right now. If you are interested in learning more, we have a great website that sort of goes into sort of the fundamentals of conversation design, and it's actions.google.com -design. And I have some cards up front for anyone who's interested in it.
I thought she was going to take a selfie. I was like, that's
With
such a
my
good
card.
idea. Yeah. And then I saw you pull out the card. I'm like, oh. Darn. Do you want to go next?
Sure. So as it was mentioned earlier by probably everyone in this panel, AI is like a very interdisciplinary field, and we've all touched on our very diverse backgrounds and the team members that compile our teams, essentially. So definitely having an interest in any type of field that incorporates the way that humans think and wanting to bridge that with technology is a way to start. So on my end, I have a cognitive science background, which is an interdisciplinary field within itself, but I also minored in education because I was very curious to figure out how people think humans should learn and how people think they should digest information. And to this day, like I use that skill on a daily basis when I'm creating conversation, when I'm creating like engineering our back end, like some of the natural language processing and so on. So some of these things that we use are actually things that we already know, that we have interests in. And I got into the field simply by expressing that I was interested in how humans think, and someone's like, hey, there's this customer support initiative going on if you want to do this. Well, I was an intern, and that's how I went into conversational engineering or conversational AI. So definitely just like sparking it with an interest and seeing like how you can apply technology to that is a way to start, because there is no clear path, as Ava mentioned, to go into AI, given that it's so interdisciplinary, and you really do need linguistics, educators, neuroscientists, like all types of degrees contributing to this field to provide like AI that is the least amount of bias, as Tiffany mentioned.
And I'll just do the whole non-academic side. So I don't think I finished college. I got really close though. But IBM was nice and hired me, and I was like, it was back in the day, some of you might know these times, where when you got hired by IBM, like everyone like high-fived you and you were like done. You like never would work for another company again. Yeah, those days are gone. It was like gone like the week after I started or something. But I am a huge believer. One of the things I loved about working at Amazon was they had a leadership principle called learn and be curious, and it was added while I was there. And I was like, this is exactly it. Like, I was rewarded by my sheer excitement about the technology. Just the fact that I thought it was cool to be able to talk to a device and get stuff to happen was enough to get my foot in the door. So I would like to just encourage you that if you have an interest and a passion, I'm a believer that you can learn anything, like whatever. If you're passionate about it, you can learn it. Right now, there are classes on Udemy. There's a MicroMasters, which I never thought I'd want to get a master's, but I'm like, ooh, 8 weeks, I could do that. So I did this MicroMasters on AI. There's a MicroMasters on robotics. There's the ability to do much more than we've ever been able to do before from a learning perspective. I have people who feel like they're stuck in their role or have loyalty to whatever lineage of like colleges that they came from. And if you just knew how very easy it was to enter into this field, it's a magic moment. It's one of those moments in your career where you'll look back 3 years from now and go, oh my God, I can't, how do I work in AI? How am I like a spokesperson for AI? A friend says that. I mean, I'm fine. But it's awesome. Like, I just think now's the time. And if you want very specific, like, here's what you need to learn. I've published it to LinkedIn many times, but I'd be happy to share it with you. But do not just let your either fear of doing something new or fear of not being able to make it or not learn it be a roadblock. Because today, like I said, we have web-based APIs that access AI models, and using those models will change companies. So if you just know that, you will be a huge value to this industry. And I'd certainly, my selfish plug, have job openings. So if anybody wants to talk to me, please do so.